Sweet. Okay, so where do we begin? Do you want to begin at 951 or the 80s version? Like, where do you want to start?
Good question. So I know that on this round, I watched it 1951 first, then 1982, but you watched it in the reverse. I'd love to talk about the 51 version and the 82 version, but I'd love to hear your reasoning for why you started with the John Carpenter version as opposed to the other version in 51.
No problem. I'll tell you why. I decided to start that way just because I kind of like with I think July or was it June when we kind of did the series of just two different films. I did Manchurian Candidate in order. So I just did the older version, the original first, and then the later version. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can easily compare and contrast this and stuff like that. But I did sort of hear that the more recent version of the thing was a little bit more diverged from like kind of the original source material a little bit or the original film. And so I kind of started to see it first because I was like, oh, I'd love to see like what things were different, but also kind of like I heard that it was maybe more psychological. So I kind of decided to do that first, and that's kind of why I did it. Also, I've just never seen, um, two films that were, like that before in that order. So I was just like, I wonder if this will change my perspective on it. And it definitely did. Kind of like I mentioned briefly, like I think, the John Carpenter version is like really, really there. Like it's very horror, for sure. There's a lot of, gore and there's a lot of blood and it's definitely way more in kind of that kind of body horror genre than I knew it was gonna be. And then it almost made me scared to watch the do one version, but then I was like, no, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna watch it. And then I was like, oh wow, this almost seems like a toned down version of this other film. But I think it's also interesting because like such different time periods. And I also thought it was kind of interesting too that like the John Carpenter film originally was like met with like very bad reviews and people did not like it. And then I think the 51 version, on the other hand, people actually really liked it. And it was kind of like this kind of new, interesting thing in the genre that kind of like opened up when it came out. And so I was also kind of like wanted to see that as well. Like, I wonder like what about this film people didn't like at first, but also like what about the original people liked? And if there was like optimism differences, because I guess on some
Yeah,
level they're both about people stuck in a very cold environment amongst each other and kind of like divulging from there, like a story about sort of humanity, I guess, in some way.
yeah,
So yes, that was why my decision kind of came out that way. But let's start with 951 first and,
yeah.
and go from there. So was this your first time watching it?
It was a few years ago. I saw the John Carpenter version of the thing, which I really enjoyed. I loved it even better this time, but we'll get to that. But this was my first time with the 1951 version. I'm a big fan of Howard Hawks, who produced this movie, and kind of sort of there's a rumor about whether he directed it, but it seems more like he was just a big mentor and influence on the real director. And it was my first time seeing it. I liked it a lot. It's very 1950s. Like, they've the only woman in the movie is the love interest. Dmitri Tiomkin, who's the composer, I could really hear like the theremin in his score. Like it's very, very 50s. Like the effects are very 50s, and I enjoyed it because I love stuff like that. Like I grew up liking the Twilight Zone,
Yeah.
but it's also like very much a product of its time. What did you think of this version?
Yeah, so I mean, going from John Carpenter to that was definitely a tonal switch, but I kind of loved how it sounded bizarre, but it was very like lighthearted to me, I guess.
It was, yeah, I get that.
Kind of a weird thing because this is again at it's based on a story about like you know um a very scary creature threatening like the lives of these people in an isolated area somewhere in the South Pole, of Antarctic tundra.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like you think, oh, this is going to be like no matter what a pretty horrifying thing just because that thought alone is very scary. But I feel like there's a very huge kind of like, oh, we're all in this together note
yeah,
the film where
yeah,
you're kind
yeah.
of like, don't worry about it. We're all gonna figure it out. And there's always like, I don't know, all the people that work for the captain are always like joking around about him, and like there's a really like great camaraderie kind of between everybody. And everyone's
Yeah,
figure out like, how are we gonna like defeat this thing? It's like they're like still making jokes kind of, and
yeah,
very quippy, I guess. So that was
yeah,
very surprising for me. But I guess also something I thought really interesting too was kind of I really enjoyed sort of like the role of the, I guess, scientist slash doctor kind of in this version. How they decided to depict him, I thought was very interesting, where he was kind of also an antagonist, I would say, in a way,
yeah.
and and kind of even like that. I think that's very unusual for the genre because I feel like usually the scientists are the first ones that find out what's going on, and then they're just like, no one's listening to me. We need to like kill this thing and stuff like that or whatever. But like it was interesting to see him be kind of like a preservationist and like really believing in science. I thought that was a really new take on it. And I really enjoyed seeing kind of like the role of journalism.
Yeah,
I did not see coming into it, but at the same time, it's very much product of its time. And I'm like, of course, there's a journalist there who's also like getting pictures and being like, what's going on here? And like, I don't know. I thought it was very light. It was very fun, and like it was kind of like a I even said like a children, like almost like a child version of this story where it was like,
it's a
yes,
boy's own adventure of this story. I felt like,
yeah,
yeah, where it's all like, hey, we're all here at the North Pole, and we're all gonna, band together, and hey, the doctor has some ideas that aren't that great, but he'll get his end, and the journalist is gonna come around to our side, and he'll get what he wants, but we'll get what we want too. I also thought that part of what makes the film not super scary to a contemporary audience is the creature design. Like, it's clearly a guy in a suit and like some makeup. Like, it's very much like when you see that, it's like, oh, it's a big guy, but he's not gonna like throw things at people. He's not gonna transform. Like, it's sort of like a almost quaint in how non-threatening his brand of threatening is.
yeah. Actually, the monster kind of reminded me in a strange way of sort of like the very early like zombie, like because it's like very plotting and slow.
Yeah,
It's kind of like how like I think well, I think it's before our generation, but kind of more of like the 90s 2000s version of like the zombie was like super fast moving and like kind of scary and like much more like violent, where this one there is definitely menace there, but I wouldn't necessarily there's like direct violence. I at least I didn't feel that that was ever like, I mean, of course it's suspected like, oh, this thing is against us, like again it's the antagonist of these characters, but there's also not necessarily like super super violent actions, and like even like it doesn't even really kill the doctor either, like it's kind of interesting where it's very much more like of like, oh, we don't know what's going to do, but like we know that we're against it and we need to like stop it, but there's not actually necessarily like an action that occurs before kind of like that kicks into gear, I guess you could say. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and maybe also why it was like felt a little bit lighter because the stakes weren't like it's gonna kill all of us. It was just
yeah.
we need to like figure out how to stop this thing because it's like against us, it's not for us, it's not human. We need to stop this thing. And it was much more about kind of eliminating it than it was about like, you know, self-preservation maybe. And the self-preservation was kind of more of a backseat, I think, to me, it seemed like in this version, which was interesting. So yeah.
I agree. For me, the design of the creature reminded me a lot of Frankenstein, where I definitely agree with you. It has that sort of old school zombie influence. But for me, like, you could clearly like imagine this version having bolts on its neck, and like if they were like, yeah, like it took over, there's definitely a reanimated corpse aspect, like with the Frankenstein monster. But I thought about that a lot in terms of the design of the creature, and I agree with you with the self preservation thing. Like, you never feel like the world's gonna end if this creature escapes. Like, you feel like he'll be taken down by the military or even by like some people who like if he encountered like a group of armed citizens, they could take him down. Like, he doesn't feel dangerous in the way that the creature and that the thing in the thing feels dangerous.
Yeah, I guess also the thing is too, I think if I remember correctly, because I know that the John Carpenter version, I want to say it's Norwegians that they
Yeah, to
basically, and
discover. Yeah,
is it in 1951 Norwegians as well?
a good question. I don't think so. I
I
don't
don't know.
remember because I feel like they discover the creature in this one. Like in the John Carpenter version, the creature has already kind of wreaked some havoc and arrives. After having already left the spaceship, where here they in the original one they find him in the spaceship and they defraw him.
Yeah. You're right. I guess it's just interesting because I was kind of like, wow, I really thrown the weed under the bus here. But also I thought it was kind of interesting to kind of like again that aspect of like, and I guess it's such a huge contrast to John Carpenter's film, but like their party and like their people on the base seem like one unit. Um,
Yeah,
like they're very much like a tech, like like tactile team. Like they're very like uh connected to each other in some ways, and like there is like like there is a some sort of shared connection there. Like it's almost like they all went through like something together, or they've all been here together, and like they've bonded appropriately. So it felt like when things went badly, it didn't ever seem like anyone in that specific unit, like barring kind of the doctor slash scientist,
yeah,
would really like go off or go haywire. Like it felt like it was like a carefully composed team, and I thought that was also
yeah,
why it was like less. There was less again a sense of like fear because you kind of felt like
yeah,
they were so solid that you didn't really think that they were gonna like fail. Um,
yeah. I agree. And that's part of one of the things I like so much about for me, like I love this version of the thing. I love the old school 1950s score by Dmitri Tiomkin. I think it's really great and experimental and cool. I love the band of brothers, professionalism aspect of it. I love the cinematography. But for me, then I like the 1982 version better because it feels like they go back and Carpenter feels like he poured over the original version carefully. And part of what I think makes the other version so scary is that it does have that sense of professionalism and builds together a cool team, but then it just completely takes them apart. And there's like a great paranoia to it. And for me, like, as much as I love the creature effects in the second one, which we'll get to whenever, I just think that it's so scary that they all just turn on each other so quickly. And I really feel like that's a big improvement.
oh, for sure. I also would say too, like no matter how separated they are, there seems to be still like a lot of communications. Like when they have the different people in different places, kind of, and they're all different doors, and they're measuring kind of like I think it's a Geiger counter of like where the creature is at certain points, and kind of like the final like act, I guess, of the film. They're still like on walkie-talkies, like there's still a connection, and I think
Yeah.
it's funny because in 1952, I'm like, wow, there's no walkie-talkies, there's no cell service, like you are just out there alone. So
Yep.
I think that's kind of funny too, because I was like, wow, in some ways this is like more technology based than the updated version one. Very rarely you find that. Usually it's kind of the opposite, of course, just because of course technology grows and they're like, oh, we need to have this and this is not here, and people won't understand, or it'll be very strange. But then this like I didn't even think about it too until I watched like people and I was like, oh yeah, why didn't they have walkie talkies?
Yeah.
I was like, wait, that actually makes a lot of sense. Like, and also this is a really good captain. Like he's like making sure that everyone kind of like is accounted for, and he's like very like studious, and and checking on his team periodically. And like I was like, wow, that's interesting. And it was a thing I didn't even notice about the other one. I was never even the idea of having like, oh, a walkie-talkie set. Probably, I mean, I'm sure they had one probably somewhere, but like they never even thought about using like. It was just very interesting to me, I guess, and that was kind of bizarre, but kind of intriguing too. And like I think that was a good idea on Carpenter's part to like not put that, and
Yeah.
because it also led to again more of the paranoia and like and suspicion, and it increased the
Yeah.
tension for sure. But no, 951 version, good, very lighthearted.
Yeah. It's a good time. It's a good afternoon movie or a good late night movie. Just kind of take your mind off stuff.
Yeah, yes, and the ending I think I really like. The ending is like the classic 1950s ending where it's like a news band being like, "We've saved the world," like
Yeah. The threat has been defeated. And for me, like, not to spoil anything for people who haven't seen it, but for me, the last line, close your cover your ears if you don't want to hear it, viewers, but the fact that it's just watch the skies is just such a perfect 1950s science fiction line. And just like the idea of like, everything's done. We've defeated the bad guy. The aliens vanquished, but there's still alien life out there. Watch the skies. Like, that's such a perfect 50s sci-fi line. I couldn't have written a better one myself.
yes, you're right. It is very well. It's like it is very like the entire story feels very like very well composed, and like it's very like they keep everything contained. You kind of feel like
Yeah.
everything that you started off with in the very first beginning like really does pay off. So it felt very like complete at the end, I guess I would say. Whereas I think the 80s version is like very like, well, we'll see what happens. Like it's a
Yeah.
very
A lot
uneasy
more
ending.
ambiguity in that one.
it's a very uneasy ending. So
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting. So if you don't mind, do you want to move to
1982.
the updated? Yes,
Yeah. All right.
1982.
Where do you want to start with this one?
I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
I guess I should. I will because I this was the first one. This is my first time watching either,
Okay.
but I did realize during probably one of the more popular, maybe I should say, special effects in this film, wherein someone's arms get torn from their body. I realized
Yep.
that I recognized the scene because I was looking at it and then I was like, this looks so familiar. So this thing, like I think I saw it as a GIF, weirdly enough. And then I was like, wait a second, isn't this? And then he did it, and I was like, no. But no, I thought this was so interesting. It special effects really impressed me actually.
Yeah.
For its time, I think that there was so many things they did that were like really inventive and again, like sort of this like body horror. It's so easy to just be like, okay, yeah, we're gonna put, some makeup and do this and that, but like there really is so much stuff, and even just like the pure size of the monster, I think
Yeah.
is like really impressive to me, and then what they did with it. So I really liked that, and I kind of also just, again, kind of like in contrast, I was kind of even thinking like, oh, okay, like, this is a horror movie. Like, it's so easy to make it like a horror movie and just, of course, be like, oh, these people are. But I think along with that, being like, there's so much paranoia, and that's like the center of the film. I think is just like not really trusting anybody, but also like, I mean, there's a few times people say like, oh, I know this really well, but
Yeah.
still, it's like I don't know. There's like this very weird air of just kind of like every man for himself, kind of, and like
Yep.
a lot of double crossing and then
Yeah.
recrossing, and then there's like and in some ways it kind of feels like while the monster is the main antagonist, of course, like he's kind of hunting, I guess you should say, like this crew, and he's he has bigger designs to get somewhere else, possibly, like you feel like the monster is scheming the entire time. I felt like he was the main antagonist, but he wasn't the only antagonist. And
Yeah.
like everyone else was also like everyone was also their own antagonist, and like people
Yeah.
were just like kind of all there's a lot of squabbling, but also there was like very little consensus, and there was like very little agreement, and it felt like again very disparate people in this place, and kind of like every man for himself. Like it definitely felt that way, and I think in the end even it kind of still has this like air of kind of like you know only the strongest survive. Like I don't know, like I don't think, I mean, in the beginning of course they want it seems like everyone to survive, but at the same time it seems like when people end up dead, it's weirdly like compartmentalized, I guess. They're like, okay, he's gone. Next. And like I'm like, wait a second, that guy, was he like your friend? Did he spend all these like months with you? Like, what's the story there? But they were just like, nope, we can't, no waiting. We need to go to the next thing. And it was just kind of interesting to see that, because I was like, wow, this is like very much kind of like, and it gets, you feel like there's a race against time for sure. Sort of
Yeah.
just be like, okay, like they need to do these things before this happens. And also you kind of almost feel like the thing and
Yeah.
isn't just menacing, like it is deadly, it is
Yeah.
homicidal. and
Yeah.
and it's not a thing of, not a case of, okay, like it's just trying to escape whatever, like and get out, like like it will do anything like it can to also kind of wipe out the people there. And so I think that was kind of interesting and different. But I really liked this film, and I was really surprised that it got such bad reviews when it came out, to be honest.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
I'm glad you liked it too. I love this movie. I feel like, especially as a work of adaptation, I feel like it takes what a lot of what I loved about The Thing from Another World and like Prince spins it into newer, darker directions, and even like certain callbacks or certain lines from the first one, they kind of take and expand into not quite major plot points, but big parts of the movie. Like
yeah,
there's this one part in the moment of The Thing from Another World where they're talking about how they're gonna kill the creature, and they go, "Oh, we could use a flamethrower." Like it doesn't like fire. We could just use a flamethrower, and then they quickly move on and do something a little less cool. But here they have not only one flamethrower, but two flamethrowers. And
Yes.
like the coolest actors of the 80s, Keith David and Kurt Russell, both use them. So
Yeah.
I even just like the minor things, you could really tell that John Carpenter did his homework. I want to say a special shout out and to Rob Bottin, who is John Carpenter's special makeup effects guy. He did all the creature design and makeup for the Ghost Pirates in the Fog, which John Carpenter had directed before this movie. He actually plays the ghost captain in that movie, so he's on screen. And I think he just does such a great job with redefining what a movie monster could be in this movie.
Yeah.
And like we'll get to in a moment how it's a lot of that sort of like the sense of paranoia the creature creates in terms of shapeshifting and stuff. But in terms of like moving from the old classic Hollywood idea of like a monster being so a scary dude, a big dude in like a scary costume with makeup, the fact that he and John Carpenter turned the idea of a monster into like a shape shifting weird thing that can turn into whatever and like it does like it can turn into like a spider and all this stuff. Like the effects in this movie are so cool and they hold up so well. There's just so much. They're like legitimately terrifying and like kind of beautiful in a grand guignol macabre way. Rob Bottin was also involved in creating some of the ideas for what the creature could do, like in the scene where the guy's defibrillating Norris and his stomach opens up and bites the guy. That was Rob Bottin's idea as a joke. And he said that to John Carpenter as a joke. John Carpenter was like, oh, yeah, let's do that. So, like, his creativity and what he did with the monsters, I think, is just so cool. And his creature design in this movie is just next level. I agree with you that for me, what makes this movie like makes it from like a B film to like an A film in terms of letter grade is just how great the paranoia stuff is.
Yeah.
Like the lead up is great, the creature stuff is great. There's still that sense of professionalism, but for me, the whole thing, which John Carpenter really did a lot of work in making pop, was just how these guys turn on each other and betray each other. And like the thing shows up, and it gives you a great idea of like how they're all still at each other's throats. But I love how like just the way Kurt Russell sees his control and how people try to take it away from him and just how everybody keeps betraying each other and like sometimes they're on the same side, sometimes they're not. And even like the fact that they go so dark as like McCready kills a guy who's going to attack him and then to reveal that guy wasn't the thing and he just killed a guy just to protect himself and protect, his position, I just think is amazing. Just like the whole sense of professionalism, but also the whole don't trust anybody, constantly betraying each other, treasure the Sierra Madre vibe, I thought was something really cool that Carpenter brought to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that that was probably the biggest difference. Again, is just like these are definitely not a unit of people that trust easy or trust each other that easily, especially when things start kind of going south. But I also I just really did not anticipate seeing uh Kurt Russell being double crossed that way. That really
Yeah.
shocked me actually that happened. When I was like, wait, you can't just like almost kill like Kurt Russell like halfway through the movie. Like what's going on right now and stuff like that. And then like same like him then you see a darker side to him to keep
Yeah.
control. But even then it's like the leadership is so tentative, isn't it? It's based just around like in that moment who has the best idea in some ways. Like and even though we following him, it seems like at some point it's not even really him and like the men fighting together. It's almost like in a weird way like a group of people fighting. Like it's just again, it's so disparate and it's kind of like so bleak. And it's like and I think again like the whole idea of like humanity being like the centerpiece kind of like yes, of course, like they want to stop the thing from escaping and possibly going, somewhere else and replicating a new form. And that's like the
Yeah.
major, I guess I should say, like their major goal throughout the film is just stopping that from happening. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's also just like seeing like again, just like the way that they start to kind of fall apart very easily, especially against this thing, kind of like and showing all of their own frailties, their own kind of like suspicions. I would say one thing that I thought again very funny. Now I think about the whole, there's no walkie-talkie, there's no way for the code there. How many times they're like, okay, like, this thing, it replicates people, whatever, for that, and then they just like leave people alone. Just like, what are you doing? Like, but I mean, it's a classic horror. I mean, I wasn't mad at it at all. I just thought it was really funny, especially when like I think it was the person in the like supply shed, and the other guy's like, okay, I'm gonna go get some stuff. I'll see you later. And I was like, don't go.
Yeah.
And then they went, and I was like, that's it. That's that guy's. He's done so. And like, it was just so funny because I was just like, wow, like I don't know, like, and again, like there was no cohesion there because like you would think like if we were to take the team in the 1951 version and drop them in the 1780 version, like immediately they'd be like, okay, no one goes out alone, everyone, only two people together and stuff like that. No one just like
Yeah.
up ever. Like we're all gonna be together, we're all gonna be in this area and stuff like that. And we're gonna barricade these, you know what I mean? Like it's like very much
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, like there's a plan, but it's like as soon as like again, it's like as soon as things start happening, even though they kind of know some information, they're still like, all right, I'm gonna go out alone and just see if and you're like, don't, what are you doing, man? Or people are just like, all right, I'm gonna go check on this thing, and they're like, bye. And you're just like, I thought, what? And it's so, I don't know, it's like, it's not funny, but it's like so amusing, I guess, to watch when you kind of understand at some point, like, oh, okay, it's like, as soon as that person's alone, like they are a target, right? And they are,
Yeah.
a victim potentially. So that was kind of interesting. I guess my biggest thing was, I think my favorite effect from this
Yeah.
movie. It's hard. I really like the spider head. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie, I
That's a
thought that
really
was
cool
really
one.
cool. But I do think like just kind of like the mask that became the thing at the very end, kind of, and like the
Yeah.
final standoff. I thought that was again just like the scope of it and how huge it was, and especially for like that time period, like it kind of made me marvel at it. And I was like, wow, that was like so much hard work, but also like it's so impressive. They also got, all this together, and I thought it was like a really great escalation point too, because it was just like another person, and like, okay, I can understand that. And like, standoff where it's kind of like again, like, okay, who do you trust? Who do you believe? Who do you think is this? Like I can understand that on some level, but I think the idea of like it just showing itself fully, like in its kind of natural form in some ways at the end was just really interesting. And I really liked that kind of turn, and like that kind of like final standoff was so much more fun to watch because of that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's a tough one just because of how many great special effects there are, but I just love when Norris just kind of opens up and bites that guy's arms off. Like, just like it's so unexpected. It's like so like there's a sense of logic to it. Like there's a sense of surprise because you don't expect that to happen, but there's like it feels like a type of logical like thing the organism would have, and it's just like the overhead shot is just the perfect distance from his body to make it really shocking. So I like that one, and then I like the one with the dog, where the dog starts
Mhm.
to turn into the thing, because it's like probably the one of the grossest ones for me, just because of just how much blood there is. And I also like it gives you such a great insight into the creature when it kind of opens up. You can see the dog head and skull, like just the sense of it's still the how it's assimilated the creature. I thought is very good.
Yeah, I that was actually a really good scene too. I forgot about that one. You're right. That was like a really
Yeah.
interesting, and like, you see like the tendrils too. They're like attaching to things, and like
Yeah.
how it's doing. It's almost like plant like almost in some weird way where it's like kind of like these different disparate parts kind of, and like they're all like almost like seed pods spreading out, and like it's like on the other dogs as well. But no, you're right, that was actually a really good scene. Yeah, I mean, the film overall, it's special effects wise was just so impressive. I really enjoyed that part of it. I think that part really like it really elevated the film again, like kind of like it just elevated, I think, you know, definitely like I love a psychological thriller for sure. I think they're super fun, but I do think that like, for a film to be like straight up horror, like there definitely has to be like some interesting new ways that you're seeing like, like what's kind of like behind the curtain, I guess, a little bit and stuff like that. And I think like that something's gonna something's gonna happen. You know that
Yeah.
it's that you're like, but nothing that happens is anything you would suspect. I think
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
really hard to
definitely.
do as a horror, like, and I think I would have to say, like, for the shot scene again, like I think I saw a gif of it, so I kind of knew it was happening. But I also think maybe like on some level, because I have seen Alien, I was like, something's gonna happen with this just like I was like, I don't. I've seen this movie before. Like I don't like as soon as like you show someone's chest, like I'm gonna like go back to Alien and I know there's gonna be something going on there. And so I feel like maybe that was like, but again, like I think so early on to show this and stuff, and like maybe again if I had been like a fresh viewer, I would have been like, I have no idea what's gonna happen right now. I'm genuinely just like watching, watching to see what happens next. But I think everything else that I hadn't seen before, like I was just like, wow, I did not see that coming, and like it was like pretty shocking even when they find the thing and it's partially changed into the one person that has like the hands aren't assimilated yet.
Yeah.
And that's like also horrifying. But no,
Yeah.
I really liked it. Was there anyone in the film when you're watching it? And I know this is like a rewatch for you, but now that you rewatch it, is there anyone that you're like, oh, now I see why that there was some tells that that person was an assimilated thing?
Good question. I always like, just because it's been a while since I've seen it, I'd forgot enough to kind of not pick up on some of the tells. But my favorite is that when, and this isn't really a surprise, but there's a and again, this is spoilers for people watching. When Briggs, the Wilford Brimley character, pushes that guy up against the wall, and he's the thing, he doesn't have his glasses on because the thing has advanced so much that it could see without his glasses. My question for you though is: was there any guesses or any tells you saw among the characters in the John Carpenter thing where you're like, oh, they're the thing, and then you were right?
Um, I actually for so long I was so convinced that the guy that went to get the dogs was the
Yeah,
a assimilate, but then he wasn't. So it really like threw me off, and I was like, wait a second. Um, I guess I also I never the guy that was kind of, oh gosh, I wish I remembered his name. The really twitchy guy. I
yeah,
was like always like I don't think no. I never really thought he
yeah,
was. So when he wasn't, it wasn't surprising to me, I guess. I don't think there was any. I mean, again, I feel like I just thought the wrong people were,
yeah.
but also, I mean, I guess major spoiler alert. So skip this part completely if you're watching. But do you think Child's gonna assimilate at the end?
I'm very glad you brought that up. That was gonna be my next question for you.
Because
So,
I
yeah,
do
what do you think?
not, but now I think maybe he was. Because I was like, everyone that I thought was so far has not been. So like maybe he is, but also I was like, I don't know, like maybe the thing. I mean, again, it seems to be a very intelligent creature, and I think we
Yeah,
get that at some point. Like it's not just going around and then like whatever. Like it's very like it's like integrating very well with the group whenever it needs to interact with them. And so
yeah,
part of me was like, if Child isn't, if he's legitimately an assimilate, and like he's the thing right now, maybe again, like he's seen what happened so far. He's seen the
yeah,
whole blow up. Maybe he's like, I'm playing this the long game version. I'm not going to just attack her Russell. Like I'm gonna wait until we have someone. We're gonna like get rescued. We're gonna go
yeah,
off. And that's when I'm going to change and attack everyone on the cargo ship, and that's how I'm gonna escape this situation. Um, yeah, yeah. Because actually, for a minute, I did think Kurt Russell was the thing.
yeah,
Like especially like, and I guess it was like that. I don't know why, but that interaction that he has with the doctor when he opens the thing, and then he's like, "I'm not letting you out." But then I was like, "What if the doctor is right?" And if the doctor kind of like uh, shut down any way for them to escape, right?
yeah,
And so in some ways, I was like, "Oh, I know that they got really mad about that," but also I was like, "Oh, in some ways, the doctor actually that was like a really smart decision on his part because he knew that this entity was intelligent enough to find a way if it could to
yeah,
escape. And so even though it screwed everyone else over, like he was still like doing in some ways like it wasn't to look at the time, but it was a very brave thing to do, which is like doing them, but also making sure that like it did not escape them and it didn't,
yeah,
again, like possibly impact humanity. And so I was like, okay, but like if Kurt Russell was a thing, then like maybe he is again trying to like make them all turn on the doctor because he's like, okay, I need to find a way to escape if I have them turn on the doctor for like,
yeah.
and the doctor cut off my exit plan kind of thing. And so I thought Kurt Russell was the thing. So I
Yeah.
was surprised when he wasn't,
That
but
would have been a really good twist, especially considering how big of a star he was at the time, and that to have him be the thing would have been a really cool twist.
yeah, it would have been. But I don't know. But Childs, what's your take?
I'm glad you brought that up. I see it both ways, and I can offer support for both theories. So there's a theory online that I read, which is that throughout the movie, this part's fact, Kurt Russell is throwing Molotov cocktails. So there's a theory online that says that, the scotch he gives to Childs at the end is actually gasoline. And even because the thing has assimilated, but it's still like not fully human, it drinks the gasoline and is like, ah, good. So when he sees that, he's like, oh crap, I'm gonna die. That's the thing. But personally, I don't think he is, in part because there's a 2011 remake. I don't think John Carpenter was involved, but they stated that you can't when the thing assimilates, it can't assimilate inorganic matter. And Childs has an earring, and Childs has an earring in the final scene when he comes back. And
Wow.
I also I just love the ambiguity of it. Like I was talking to a friend of mine about it. And he was like, "Yeah, they could either be the thing. They could both be the thing. None of them could be the thing." And I just love the sense of dread. And I've also read Keith David who plays Childs. They've asked him like, "Yeah, what do you think about the ending of the thing?" And he goes, "All I know is it wasn't me." So I can argue for both for and against, but I just love the sense of desperation. And either way, it doesn't really matter because both of them aren't coming out of there, I think. And just this idea that, and to go back to, I love that it ends on a note of professionalism, like you were talking about, like the whole band of brothers, the thing for another world, like we're all in this together. We're in the 50s, like we're gonna, win everything. We're America at the zenith of its power. But I love that the reverse flip angle of that is their professional just being like, okay, we did the job. We're gonna die. Like, let's just drink and we'll be, we've been arguing the whole movie. Let's just kind of have a note of camaraderie. We'll
Yeah.
just drink, we'll raise our glass, and then we'll, just lay here until something happens. So I like the ambiguity of it more than anything else. I think that if it's anybody, it's Childs. But personally, I kind of like the idea that none of them are, but they're both just like not getting out of there. What about you? What do you think?
I guess my biggest thing was I know that like a big part of, when they decide to kind of have their final stand up is they're like, oh, there's gonna be this huge storm coming. We almost like can't even see like, when the doctor escapes from kind of the outpost stuff and they can't even find him because it's like so hard to see and stuff, and they kind of
Yeah.
find all that stuff. I'm like, okay, like so it's gonna be a really tough storm, which again, like, this is probably gonna be like negative, 50. It's like probably and very freezing colds with that. And like for a child to be gone that long in that sort of temperature and to still be able to like walk back to camp, like I don't know if I buy it, to be honest, just because it seems like
Yeah.
he's gone for so long. And again, just like thinking of a human body, I'm just like, I mean, isn't that like a whole part of like, I mean, I know that's a huge part. Like when people do go to the poles or even they go to Antarctica, they're like, oh, like when a storm happens, like you need to be inside because you aren't, like you will get parts of your body will be, amputated. Like it's
Yeah.
genuinely that cold. And of course it's like wind, but it's also, there'll be like whiteouts as well, where it's like so hard to see anything that you can't even really get. Like you can be walking, thinking you're walking a straight line, you can go like, this because it's like it's so hard to see anything and the wind's hitting you so hard. And I know that that was like again a big part of like how when the creature became the doctor, how he escaped kind of and stuff, was that it was like hard to see him and then it was shut up on the lights. And so I was like, when I saw Childs again, I was like, there's no way. There's no way he survived that. There's no way he was able to get all the way away and then come all the way back and still have like, functioning limbs. Like I just felt that that was like almost unbelievable. Again, like I do think that like if the creature is as smart as like, we think it is, like it's just assimilating again. And it's like, okay, like my next plan is just laying low and like not attacking anybody. And like there's no point in me attacking this guy because, you know, I've already seen that he can do whatever he wants and he still has some dynamite probably. So like I'm gonna just chill with him and then, see what's next and sort of thing. Like so I guess I still think Childs is I think he is the thing at the end.
Yeah. I think if it's anybody, I think it's Childs.
Yeah, I don't think I think Russell proved himself. And I think, yeah, to again, it's very like it is very intelligent, but I think like they say at some point, like no matter what, like it will always try to preserve, it's very much out for itself and it's out for, preserving itself in any way that it can. So I don't see him, even if he was a thing, like killing when
Yeah.
it wouldn't make sense. Even if he was trying to blend in, and at that point, everyone else had been dead, basically, or was killed in some way. So I was like, yeah, like, there would be no point in him following that out until the end with the dynamite and everything. Like, there's just no point, because there's not really. I mean, at that point, again, if he was, then they would have won. So I was like, okay, so he's definitely not, but I don't think he's gonna get out of there alive.
Yeah.
So that's my takeaway.
Nice.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
still two great films, and I really like the adaptation. I really like what they did with it, and I think
Of
they're
the
both good in their own ways.
I agree. They both have strengths. They're both good for different occasions, but if you had to pick of the two, which would you say is your favorite?
Well, I did look it up, and I know that the Carpenter version is played at the South Pole every February before winter begins, which I think is horrifying, but also very funny. Um, I think that if I was going to have to watch one again, I think I would watch the Carpenter version again because I think I want to. Now that I know who ends up, I do want to rewatch to watch the different tells, but also like I want to look more into this child's story. So I'm like, okay, I need to like look at him more closely. But I don't know, like I think even knowing the twists as they are and how they're coming along, like it's still very fun to watch, I think, even again. Like I could see myself actually having a genuinely good time watching it again, just because I think like no matter how much I know, it's still like really fun and it's
Yeah.
like really entertaining to watch no matter what. Like it's kind of one of those films. So I think for rewatch, I would watch the John Carpenter version. How about you?
The same. I
Yeah.
just think it holds up so well. You can I'm very eager now after our conversation to kind of check for little tells of who's the thing, little foreshadowing.
Yes.
I just love like the cinematography and like the whole backstabbing stuff. I think the performances are much better, so I have to go with the Carpenter version of the thing.
I was going to say one thing though. I do think that the 1951 version, if it was made into a radio play, I think could be very interesting, and I would definitely like listen to it
Oh, agreed.
because
Yeah,
I
you
think
can
that
do a
there's
lot
like
of cool effects. Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot of really cool effects. I think that, again, the music and kind of like all that stuff is very very well done, and I think in like a radio play format, I think that that's like again like kind of a fun listen, I guess. And the film, of course, is still fun to watch, but I think like as a radio play as well, like just because there is like a lot of visual cues and like I would say the 1991 version is like definitely more dialogue heavy than the 80s
yeah,
version. The 80s version definitely relies more on like looks and
yeah,
people
yeah,
being like like 51 version is like here's this like one page monologue and stuff like that, and then the one's like oh well da, 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 and stuff like that, and like especially at the end where it's like all the people sitting around with the love interest and then they're all like quipping and going back and forth, and it's like it's very dialogue
yeah,
heavy for sure, and there's like much more of like a like let's stand in this sort of formation and talk for a while. And so I think like radio would be really interesting for that adaptation of that specific script. But no, I think again it's a good film for sure. And I think if you're not into horror or if you're not into
yeah,
like blood and gore, I would actually recommend the 1951 version because I think it's still really entertaining and it still has like a really fun kind of alien spacey vibe to it. But it's definitely way, way, way less gory and light on the blood buckets. So I would definitely recommend
yeah.
someone that's like not into horror.
I agree.
Yeah,
Cool.
cool. All right,
Yeah.
stop the recording.